Gangsters, cops, and politicians, get ready to rock on a mission. Each one of us shares our own vision. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. While I patrolled the streets, all the T's I meet. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. While I patrolled the streets, all the T's I meet. While I pulled the boat, got to stay woke. I like to thank God above. I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above.
Robert Black Bob Coach Vasquez took power and implemented new ideas after Bobo and Death Row Joe's impeachment. Vasquez proposed that no one man would ever again be the sole Nuestra Familia with control over the entire organization. This led to the creation of an NF Mesa that was made up of 3 generals. This Mesa was later renamed the Overall Governing Body, or OGB. Vasquez was an advisor and coach, a name he earned at Old Folsom Prison for making NF members work out in an exercise routine commonly known as the Machina. He was incarcerated with the California Department of Corrections from 1977 to 1985, with the last 2 years being on parole. He and his close friend Brown Bob Viramontes and other NF supported the creation of a northern structure, or Nuestra Raza, via a XIV bonds that was written in Folsom 4A building. This created a category system for entry-level NS, Cat 1 being soldiers, squad leaders is Cat 2, and undercover NF is Cat 3s. The northern structure / Nuestra Raza was referred to as being hermanos, or bros, while made NF members were called carnales, or Cs. Credit for drafting the bonds goes to several people, depending on who you ask. But Cornelio Corny Tristan was definitely one of the key people involved. But this effort had to get the support from the majority of the NF who were housed at the time at the DVI prison in Tracy. As you may recall me saying earlier, the NF had dwindled down in the late 1970s to early 80s from 700 members to only about 100 members and close associates. Some of those alleged to have co-signed off on the bonds were Hector Copas Gallegos and Michael Manos Sosa, Bobo's own brother, who remained in the O but later dropped out, and a few others. The final bonds were then distributed to the main lines via people like Dancing Bear Viramontes and Skip Villanueva, who were both in their early 20s at the time. There are some people today who claim there was discussion of this northern structure at DVI back in the late 1970s, before it was discovered at Folsom 4A. If so, there is little to no solid documentation of this, but there is hard documentation of it in the early 1980s at Folsom 4A and also in many NFC files, the confidential part of inmate records. I have personally read many of these files. While some northern structure / Nuestra Raza documents state the birthday of the organization is January 22nd, 1984, when Brad Paulo Prigley de Sacra was killed at New Folsom, I know this not to be true, as New Folsom was not even built yet. I should know. I helped open it in 1987. What the NF did was backdated. As I stated, the bonds were written towards the end of 1983 and sent out to the main lines in 1984. Prigley was actually killed on January 22nd, 1989 at New Folsom. This was 5 years after the professed birthday date. The death of Prigley in early 1989 at New Folsom is undisputed. We had Northern Structure shot caller Dimas Diablo de Leon housed at New Folsom Beef Facility in the late 1980s, and he has described getting instructions from NF leader James Tibbs Morado to get his hair cut in a diamond-shaped Mongol style. This is where the head is shaved except for a long ponytail at the back top. This development was also relayed to me by many NS over the years and was done so structure could be easily identified by NF as allies. In similar fashion, the Mexican Mafia and Sureños would often shave their heads bald to help recognize each other during battles out on the yards. These hairstyles soon spread out to the streets, where it was often used as an identifier by law enforcement. Tibbs also sent word to Corcoran when it opened in 1988 that there was to be no peace treaty with Laeme or Sureños. I also dealt directly with Luis Roche from San Francisco's Mission District when he was housed at New Folsom Sea Facility, where, as a yard officer, I noticed he would stand with 2 bodyguards surveying the entire yard. Roche's crew took over Sea Facility, which was considered a soft yard within CDC standards. I wrote the main report on this particular incident. Roche became a regimental commander and later DO'd during Operation Black Widow.
Now, even though some of the key leadership, Coach, aka Black Bob Vasquez, and some of the other NF leadership were locked up at Old Folsom 4A back in the early 1980s, separate from the majority of the Nuestra Familia and Northern Structure who were housed at DVI in Tracy, California. I clearly remember a lot of the old guards saying that the NF would never have control of Folsom. Well, maybe Old Folsom, but I'm telling you, at New Folsom, they had the yard. They took it shortly after I started there. But then as the Bulldogs came on the yard, the Bulldogs took it away from them. I would say it was probably about a year before that Bulldog Northern Structure fight. There was another case. I was working as a C-34 dining officer at the time, and one of my workers didn't show up for work one day. I remember his name was Pingo Delgadillo. This guy liked to rap when he was on break. He wanted to be a rapper, and he was from Stockton, which is just south of Sacramento, California. So this guy doesn't show up for work, and I asked that Central Tower to page him over the intercom. He still doesn't show up. So I look out the window, and this was shortly before yard recall, and I watch him and another old guy that I knew was NF walk over the weight pile to where the black inmates were working out. One of the black inmates has a newspaper, and it looked to me like he handed them something. They then walked over to the Sally Part area in between the small yard and big yard. This area is very narrow. I would say probably no more than 20 feet across, maybe less. And that yard recall, you have one gunner who's watching the big yard and the other gunner's on the other side watching the small yard. In between is a lot of blind spots. And so they call this Blood Alley. So these 2 individuals then creep up to Blood Alley, and I remember stabbed 3 Sureños up real bad, right underneath the gunner's eyes. Once again, his peripheral vision, he's looking out at the yard during yard recall. He's not looking right down, and that's where it happened. And they knew that would be his reaction. At that point, the Nuestra Familia and Northern Structure took the yard. I also have noticed when this was happening that a guy named Luis Roche from San Fran Mission was standing down by the lieutenant's office when this happened. So he's doing 2 things. He's supervising and he's acting as point man in case any of the staff come out of the lieutenant's office. I don't know if Pingo ever became a rapper, but I know he earned his stripes that day.
If you're a young man, you may have been impressed with some of these individuals in this organization. I don't mean to glorify them. They should not be worshiped, but they should be understood. I hope you learned something from this program. My book has a lot more information. Please consider buying it. Partial proceeds will go directly to local youth programs to keep young people engaged and into far more positive activities. Thanks for your support. Until next time, stay safe.
God above. I like to thank God above.